As an executive or team lead, there's one question that you need to keep in mind. Why aren't our individual contributors performing to the level that we need and that I think they're capable of? The reason that your team isn't performing at its best isn't the talent, skill gap, or their effort. It's actually blind spots in your leadership. For example, Xerox PARC invented the graphical user interface, but they thought it was worthless until Apple brought it to the masses. Or Blockbuster, who famously passed on acquiring Netflix. And even the Securities and Exchange Commission, who refused to investigate Bernie Madoff, despite a decade of analysts telling them there was something wrong there. Or even NASA, who launched the Challenger, despite the engineers telling them that there were going to be problems with the O-rings. And well, these blind spots, they lead to missed opportunities, massive financial failures, and untimely death. Blind spots are often expensive, business crushing, but avoidable mistakes. And that's exactly why I'm making this video. In this video, we're going to dive deep into leadership blind spots and the negative impact they have on the individual contributors in your teams. We'll break down why executives have blind spots, the impacts on their team and revenue, what the future looks like if those executive behaviors don't change, and as a bonus, we'll explore how this trickles down to your individual contributors. By the end, you'll understand where you're missing your mark and how to correct it. So keep watching till the end. If you're responsible for the performance of individual contributors who are struggling with less than needed performance, also known as low employee engagement, then this video is for you. Whether you're a CEO, a team lead, or a founder, the 40% Better system can improve your team's performance. Why do executives have blind spots? Well, first of all, executives are human, and we all have blind spots. And being an executive doesn't magically excuse people from having blind spots. Second, it's an insufficient level of curiosity. Execs and even non-execs rarely ask themselves, how would somebody approach this problem from a completely different direction? They don't question their mental models or their beliefs, and they rarely question the standard narratives about how things work. And third is a misplaced perspective about what's important at work. Execs get stuck on shareholders and profits, while forgetting that their people are the ones that actually generate that value and those profits. All of these happen because the standard leadership frameworks fail to address team lead responsibilities, building psychological safety, and intrinsic motivation. And because standard leadership frameworks lack these three key elements, leaders have no idea what they're missing. For the last 20 years, I've worked with everything from startups to household brands. I've also been coaching fresh college graduates, experienced industry veterans, and even executives at Google and Tesla. And these three very different groups of people had fascinating overlaps in their blind spots. I've seen self-doubting powerhouses struggle with anxiety. I've seen careers cracked by faulty industry assumptions, and I've seen companies killed because of the executive's fears. Every time there were massive blind spots. And the blind spots that created the most damage, they came from the leaders. And this is because executive blind spots have so much leverage to cripple a business. That's why we built the 40% Better system. The 40% Better system is designed to shine a light in the darkness, give you a path out of the blind spots, and assuage any concerns you may have that there's a stain on you as a human being. Oh, and it gives detailed instructions on how to operate to minimize any future chance of blind spots. Today I'll show you exactly how to do that. The second startup I worked for was acquired by a big national brand because we were both very profitable and growing at an exceptional rate. We had a history of moving fast, of launching innovative products and delighting our customers. And then the acquiring company put multiple layers of executives on top of us and brought all of our progress to a halt. They crippled my software team. They broke our stellar customer service team, and they even locked down the sales team from bringing in revenue. 3 years later, once stellar profits were gone, market share was vanishing, and the sales team, they were dying. The startup was killed by the big brand that acquired us because that big brand had no idea how to run a tech business. At another company, I inherited a software team. The CTO warned me on my first day that the team I was getting was the worst performing team in the company. Probably not the best cheerleading speech. 6 months later, I'd made them the best performing team in the company. The CEO was dumbfounded because he had no idea such a turnaround was possible. The executives from Google and Tesla that I coached, and these are people with billion-dollar budgets, they shared a very funny blind spot. They wanted out of their existing companies and roles, and they wanted to go to a new company and have a new adventure. But they were convinced they could only be valuable in a company that was identical to the one they were trying to get out of. And this was despite having skills and experience and successes that transcend the companies. At another startup, we were struggling with user adoption. Existing users were quite happy, which delighted the investors. But our weekly new user numbers, they were crawling. This was a bad sign for the investors and for the rest of the team. The website had been designed by one of our founders, and he was sure he was the smartest person in the company. But he had no background in user experience. He had almost zero curiosity, and he refused to even look at the research around getting new users into sites. And then it became a factor for the next funding round. Investors have metrics, and ours were falling too far behind. We might fail before we even really launched. And then I went to the big G. I was hired to solve a user adoption problem with software developers who use the company's external-facing APIs. I interviewed over 100 people, from individual contributors to executives. They all said the obvious solution was both technically impossible and illegal. Sadly, they were all wrong. When I finally got to talk with the corporate attorneys, they laughed and said it was completely legal, and then pointed me to the in-house team that had already built a technology that could solve the problem. I could go on all day about the leadership blind spots that I've seen, and hopefully you get the point. And now, let's look at how do you solve those things. The 40% Better system was designed to help solve the blind spots that leaders and individual contributors have in organizations. It doesn't matter where you live in the hierarchy, we're all human, and as I said before, we all have blind spots. The solution is to understand what the most common blind spots are, how to solve them, and then be curious to find more blind spots. This is a proven framework for struggling teams to turn into engaged and high-performing units. Let's start with a few of the most common blind spots. The first one is different mental models between the executives, the middle managers, and the individual contributors. Executives often think that everyone in the company understands the depth and the impact of what they're talking about. But sadly, they don't. Individual contributors feel that they can't speak truth to power, even when those truths will help the business progress. Execs don't understand this. Executives rarely understand the communication skills that they take for granted, and they don't ask why individual contributors aren't getting the attention they deserve. The second blind spot is the competitive advantage of emotional resilience and how to talk about it. Execs rarely have any self-awareness about how or why their or anybody else's emotional resilience works. They don't understand how their own emotional resilience has helped their career. And full disclosure, I've been one of those people. Because executives don't know the science behind emotional resilience, they don't talk about it in a substantive way with their direct reports, with HR, or with anybody else in management. And they don't realize the huge competitive advantage that their business could have if everyone understood the science behind emotional resilience and how to leverage it for forward progress. The next blind spot, communication skills, or the lack of them. Execs don't hear the latest intel from individual contributors because the individual contributors haven't been taught how to present that information effectively. Unfortunately, radical candor, it doesn't really work. Your people are trying to bring valuable information to you, but you're not hearing it. Your people need training to overcome their social anxiety and how to frame that information so you can hear it. Yes, they have social anxiety, and that's a whole other conversation. The next blind spot is understanding power dynamics in a company. Smart executives have open door policies for people who can bring them new and valuable information. But the individual contributors don't really know this. Individual contributors and middle managers regularly say, "That's above my pay grade," when they have knowledge that could dramatically improve your business. You're at a competitive disadvantage with every person in your organization who thinks that something is above their pay grade. Individual contributors and middle managers need to understand how to research and validate their data, how to test it on internal stakeholders, and then how to present that effectively to executives. And the next blind spot is not having clear paths to promotion. Your promotion path is opaque. You don't train internally for promotions, and you lose really good people because they don't see a path ahead in your company. All these blind spots, they're individually expensive by themselves, and even more so when you put them all together in an organization. And as you'd expect, when you can flip them around, it opens all kinds of doors for productivity, revenue, and employee engagement. Transforming your business isn't about working harder, it's about working smarter. By applying the 40% better system, you'll not only help your business achieve the success that you want, but you'll also build an environment where your people can thrive. If your people are falling short of their potential, let's talk. Send me a message with the phrase blind spots, and I'll personally help you identify what's missing and show you how our system can help your teams operate better. Let's build the business that you've always envisioned, one that's engaged, effective, and consistently delivering results.